Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Waggle. My name is Jeff Ulrich. This is your daily fantasy golf preview show brought to you by Roto Curve. And welcome back. Yeah, as I already mentioned, my name is Jeff Ulrich. Also go by Wave Goodbye on most major sites. You can follow me on Twitter as @thefantasygrind. And welcome back to another week of fantasy golf. Last week, the Memorial, pretty exciting tournament. Came down to a playoff. Justin Rose, David Lingworth. Pretty exciting stuff, really, for a lot of reasons for me. It was actually pretty cool to see Lingworth win. He's a really solid player who's shown up in some big events in the past, so I wasn't super shocked to see him win. I mean, I think he's obviously a little bit out of nowhere, but he's also a pretty solid player. So from that perspective, I wasn't overly shocked. I guess he's a little bit hit or miss, but for me personally, it was a good week and sort of also a bit of a letdown. I ended up taking third in the big $27 fairway on DraftKings. That's all fine and well. It was a nice score, but the Rose playoff cost me first place, so it cost me about $13,000. Yeah, it was a little bit heartbreaking, but it happens. That's pretty much what it comes down to every week. First and second, comes down to one stroke. So no big deal. I'll deal with it and move on to next week. But it was exciting stuff. I don't always have that big a sweat, and it was pretty cool actually to have that chance. So, and really, Justin Rose probably even lucky to be in the playoff. He was playing pretty poorly on Sunday. I thought he was gonna win the tournament for sure after Saturday, just because he was looking so solid. But yeah, he didn't. And actually, the other player who let me down was Francesco Molinari. Part of the Super Molinari Bros, didn't quite come through on Sunday either. He looked like he was going to win, but he choked. So kudos to David Lingworth because he really deserved to win that. Yeah, good tournament though overall. Lots of good stuff. Couple things to take away from it. Obviously Justin Rose is playing well for the U.S. Open. I'm not so sure if the course really fits Justin Rose, and it's kind of probably a shame because I think if it was a traditional U.S. Open course, I'd really like Justin Rose, but I don't like him as much, even though he is playing well. Something to keep in mind, though, because the course for the U.S. Open is really different. I'll touch on that in a sec. But Spieth played really well on Sunday. That's really going to drive his ownership up for the U.S. Open as well. I'm not sure if I like Spieth too much either. I'm not sure if the course is great for him, but at the same time, it's pretty hard to ignore the kid when he's playing that well. A couple other people to keep an eye on. Jason Duffner really flashed some form early in this tournament. He's interesting. And then Dustin Johnson also keeps playing well, but also keeps blowing up. So I got my eye on him for the Open, but I'm not sure if he's my pick to win yet or what. But he's close. He's just he's a little bit off, it seems like. So, and actually Molinari is also someone to keep an eye on for the Open. He's had about 3 or 4 really close calls now in the past 3 weeks, and he's used to playing links. So Molinari is going to be on my my radar for the U.S. Open too. So let's talk about this week. DraftKings, a little bit different tournament, same size, $250K, but $100 buy-in, and it's got a lot flatter payout structure this week. So if you are playing GPPs, I'd check that out. $30K to first. It's a great tournament to take a shot in because the payout structure is just so much better. If you do end up like getting them in cash, you're going to double your money. A top 10 is, the difference between first and 10th isn't so big this week, so it's a good tournament. I'm looking forward to it. And then also DraftKings just released their U.S. Open pricing today. So you got to take a look at that. I've had a chance to browse through it. It looks like it's fairly soft, but most major pricing is just because of the quality of the field is. So you're going to be able to create some really good looking teams. That doesn't mean the teams are going to do well, but I think you're going to be able. I think most people are going to have a pretty easy time making teams. It's definitely catered toward a little bit more recreational players, which is fine. I'm fine with it. You still have to make the right choices, and those top players are still going to be a little bit harder to make lineups with. So I haven't taken a huge look through it, but that's just my first impression. I'm really looking forward to Chambers Bay. Like I mentioned before, Chambers Bay is a bit of a different U.S. Open course. I'm just going to touch on it briefly now. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I'd recommend sort of Googling it. It looks like a British Open course, huge fairways, huge bunkers, huge greens. It's just link style, wide open. It's on the sea as well, so if the wind gets up, that's really going to play a huge factor. It looks tough, but it looks tough in a British Open aspect. So for the U.S. Open, I'd kind of recommend checking out people's British Open results, maybe targeting players who've had good links results. instead of just looking at the sort of traditional U.S. Open, past U.S. Opens. So just something to touch on. Some early U.S. Open ideas for me. I'm really liking Henrik Stenson. I like the fact he's under the radar. He's healthy now. He was sick for like a whole month or something. Played pretty well in Sweden last week, and now he's already taken a look at the course too, which I really like. I like the fact he's gone out there and he's had a chance to walk the course. I kind of like Ricky Fowler this week. I think the course is going to suit him, and I kind of like Patrick Reed as well. I think the course sort of suits both their games. Grinded out guys who can hit certain type of shots that are going to play well in links golf. And then, like I already mentioned, Molinari. I think Jimmy Walker's probably a little bit under the radar right now. He played well to Byron Nelson, came really close to winning there. And one last guy, Paul Casey. I'm going to have my eye on him for sure. He's a good links player. Hasn't done much since the match play when he got sick, but I think he's going to be ready for this event. So those are kind of my early leans. I'm going to have a thread up on Roto Curve pretty soon talking about the U.S. Open. So definitely check out Roto Curve too if you don't have an account there. It's a great site for daily fantasy, not just golf, but baseball as well, and football in the future and stuff like that. So it's a great site. Check it out. So yeah, that's my sort of U.S. Open spiel for the week. Check out the salaries on DraftKings because the Millionaire Maker tournament is next week. But let's talk about the FedEx St. Jude Classic because that is the tournament that is this week. And this is the last tune-up before the U.S. Open. And U.S. Open qualifying actually took place on Monday and Tuesday this week. So there's already been a lot of withdrawals from this tournament. And you can probably tell from the player list this week, it's got a weaker field than most weeks. So that's just part of, where it is on the schedule. It's right before the U.S. Open. Not as many top players play this week because they want to rest up for the U.S. Open. And some players use the tournament as a tune-up. Phil's here, Dustin's here, Billy Horschel's here. So there's still some good players, but a lot of them are out. And, Paul Casey dropped out, Robert Streb dropped out, Brendan Todd, Charles Schwartzel. All those guys already withdrew from the tournament. So, first of all, make sure you don't use them this week. And then obviously, they're just resting for the U.S. Open. So I don't think any of those guys have injuries, just pure rest purposes. So when you're doing the field this week, keep an eye, make sure you don't use those guys. So the course this week, TPC Southwind, par 70, 7,200 yards approximately. Not super long, but not super short. It is par 70. This course has been here since I think like 1990 or something, but it was renovated in 2004, made it a lot tougher, lengthened it a bit. I think they actually changed it to a par 70 from a par 71. There's a lot of water on this course. It's got one of the most watered hazards on tour, and quite a few bunkers and really small green complexes as well. So that's going to be kind of a theme this week. Approach shots are going to be important because the greens are small. They get small targets to hit. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And it's a tough course. It's played tough in the past. So like I mentioned, there's lots of hazards on the course. And, the winning score here, I wouldn't be shocked if it's around -10, maybe even lower if the weather gets up. And it also could, still approach -15 if the weather stays nice and a couple guys play well. So the course, definitely a tough course. There's some correlation with a few events, the OHL Classic, which is a sort of an early season event, but some players have played well there and played well this week. So a guy like Harris English, who's won both events actually. And there's a few other players who've had some really good results. I believe Brian Gay actually has won both events as well. So that's kind of interesting. Brian Gay doesn't even play on tour anymore, but still interesting. So some stats that I'm looking at, like I mentioned, approach shots really important. So I'm looking at approach proximity. I want accurate players this week. I think that's kind of the theme of the week. Greens in regulation also important. The more greens you hit, generally the more accurate you are on your approach shots, and that's going to be important. Par 4 scoring also really important. A lot of the winners here have been ranked highly in par 4 scoring. Not a huge surprise. Only 2 par 5s on the course. And then driving distance as well, sort of a factor I'm looking at this week. A lot of big hitters have done well here. So, I think it just lends itself, the course just lends itself to being able to carry some of the trouble on a lot of the holes. So the big hitters aren't necessarily a bad play this week. You want guys who can hit those good approach shots, but if you got a guy driving the ball well and long, he's going to be able to carry it. And, Dustin Johnson's one here, Phil's one here, and that's pretty much all you need to know. Big hitters can prosper this week. So definitely worth checking out driving distance. So Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of different players have done well. So I'm not just targeting just long hitters, and I'm not just targeting just accurate players. I'm sort of just looking for the best plays this week. That's kind of the way I'm going about it. It's good. It is a very weak field. So and it's 156 players this week too. So it's going to be a big difference from last week. Like getting 6 players through this week is going to be really tough. Over 50% of the field is going to be cut after Friday. So, I'm still going to play, I think, my regular tournaments, but I could understand if people sort of looked at it this week and was like, it's just kind of a crapshoot. There are some lower. There's going to be a lot of lower-owned sort of players out there that you're going to maybe want to take a chance on, and I'm going to try and identify a few when we're going through the salaries here, because it's going to be a tough week. Like I think there's going to be some names up at the top that probably will be less than 1% owned and will probably finish in the top 10 of the tournament. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 guys like that. So trying to identify them, obviously going to be a bit of a challenge this week. I'm kind of the view that I'm just going to make a cash game lineup, throw it in some cash games, and then just make a bunch of GPP lineups and just sit back and, let the results fall where they may. Try and make as many good choices as possible. Always the best option, always the best idea anyways, but I think even more so this week, just try not to worry too much about the results. And just remember too, this is the last week to qualify for the Millie Maker on DraftKings. So, if you're looking to play satellites, it's your last chance. So get in there and play, because the Millionaire Maker does go off in less than 2 weeks now. So with all that said, let's get up the DraftKings salaries. Let's take a look and let's see what's going on this week. So Dustin Johnson at the top of the list, well deserved to be there, I think. 13K. You can still make lineups with them, but you're going to have to use players in the 7K range. And I do like Dustin this week. I do almost feel like he could go either way though, just because of the way he's playing. He's been a little bit inconsistent. Just having that one bad round or just a couple bad holes, and I feel like if he gets off to a slow start this week, I feel like he could just sort of pack it in and just be like, I'm going to Chambers Bay after Friday. And, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's probably going to put in a couple solid rounds and make the weekend. But, it's happened before at these tournaments. So I'm not going to have a huge amount of exposure to Dustin. I'll definitely have a couple GPP entries, lineups with him. But at his price, he's pretty expensive too. So creating lineups isn't the easiest with him. So that's kind of my thoughts on him. I do like him for this course, but with the major looming, I'm a little bit wary. Phil Mickelson, I was on him big last week. I thought he was going to, put together another solid week. I have no idea what he's going to do this week. I assume he'll play a little bit better just because the U.S. Open's coming up. But, he looked okay the first 2 days, and then he just imploded, which I didn't get. So I have no idea what Phil Mickelson's going to do this week. I think he actually makes for probably a pretty interesting tournament play, because I don't think there's going to be many. I think he'll probably be around 5 to 8% owned. I don't think many people will trust him at all. So if he comes out blazing and gets a big fantasy score, he's going to be a really good tournament play. I don't necessarily trust him, but I do like the tournament aspect from Phil Mickelson this week. It's just so easy just to gloss over him because, you can go, okay, I'll create my Dustin Johnson lineup. Oh, Phil Mickelson, screw him. I'm going down to Billy Horschel or something. Phil's won this event before, so and the major's coming up. I think he wants to get in a good week. So I think there's a lot of merit to Phil Mickelson as a tournament play this week. Going to be super low owned. I still don't know what he's going to do. He's still a very, he's a wild card basically. So that's enough about Phil, but we should spend a lot of time talking about these top players because they're important this week. More so because it's so top heavy. The rest of the field is pretty weak. Ryan Palmer has a really nice record at this event. He's priced really high, obviously, higher than he usually is. But, in this weak field, he's probably one of the more solid options. Good par 4 scoring, really good history of this event, hits it long, so he's going to be able to carry a lot of the hazards. I wouldn't be shocked if Ryan Palmer has a good week. He's going to be probably pretty chalky, but again, someone I don't want to ignore, but just a really solid pick, really. Palmer is so, and probably exact same thing could be said about Billy Horschel. He's got a good record at this event. I believe he was top 20 or top 10 here last year. And he's been playing well. He played really well last week, so we'll bring up his card here. 11th at the Memorial, 13th at the Players. So you can see he's tee to green. He's playing very well right now, and for me, he's one of the safest plays this week. I think he'll probably have another solid week. I won't be shocked if he wins this week. And I definitely expect him to be pretty highly owned as well. So the guy I really like this week, and the guy I think you'll definitely see a big performance from, is Webb Simpson. Webb's been a little bit erratic when you look at his results, but tee to green this year, he's actually been really good. Ranks highly in approach proximity and greens and regulation. So he's been hitting the ball well all year. It's really just been his putting that's sort of let him down. So, but he's played well this course. I believe he was like 4th or 3rd last year. So I like the way Webb's coming in, and he hasn't played in a while. So I'm expecting him to want to put in a good week before the U.S. Open as well. So Webb's definitely one of the top players I'm gonna be targeting. I think you kind of have two tiers there. You have Phil and Dustin. Obviously, Dustin is going to be the more chalky pick, with Phil being kind of a strictly wildcard GPP play. And then Palmer, Horschel, and Simpson, I think, are all three of those guys are going to be really, really popular picks to sort of center your lineup around. If I had to rank them, I would probably, lean Webb, Simpson first, Horschel second, and then Palmer third. But all three of those guys could be one of the top scorers for the week. And I expect most of them will play well too. The course sort of suits all three of them. So Harris English makes for an interesting play. I kind of wrote him up as a GPP pick this week. I think a lot of people are going to browse over him a lot like they did Phil, just because he's somewhat expensive this week, so much expensive than he has been. But he's won this event before, and he's put together 2 solid weeks of play now. So he suits this course really well. Big hitter, but really, really strong in proximity as well, and greens and regulation when he's playing well. And I believe he's ranked pretty high in par 4 scoring as well. So he's still playing okay. He just hasn't put together a top result in a while. But this is definitely a course where he could. So I think for GPP option, I really like Harris English. I think I actually like him more than Brooks Koepka. I think Koepka's going to be popular, but he really didn't play that well last week. I was expecting a lot more from him. Only had 1 round in the 60s, completely blew up on Sunday. He's been really hit or miss, to be honest, since the Masters. I thought he sort of pulled it together at the Byron Nelson and was going to put together a huge week at the Memorial. That didn't happen. So, I'm pretty happy to maybe go another way over Brooks Koepka this week. I think he'll be a popular pick. I'm probably going to fade him for the most part. It's a little bit dangerous, but I like some of these other plays better, and you can't fit all these big players on your rosters, obviously. So I'm probably going to lean Harris English for some GPP picks. I like Palmer, Horschel, and Simpson. Probably lean Horschel and Simpson, but I think Palmer's a very good play too. And then I'll probably just leave Koepka out of it for the most part. I'm just a little worried he might just be a little bit off his game right now, and he might just sort of decide it's better just to head to Chambers Bay a little early after Friday. So you never know with these tournaments right before the majors. So moving down, once you get past there, the players sort of really drop off. Jamie Donaldson's a really solid player, but he's almost 10,000 this week. He's never played this course. I do like him as like a solid GPP pick. I wish he was a little bit less expensive, and then I would actually really consider him. But I'm not sure how many shares of him I'll have. I might have one. Solid player. He's just really expensive, and he's seeing the course for the first time. Graham McDowell's played here a few times before. He's really played poorly for most of the year. I consider Graham McDowell, but I just don't know, again, for his price, if he's worth it this week. He makes for an interesting tournament play. I think Donaldson will be less than, really low owned, probably 5%. McDowell might be a little bit higher. I don't think either of them will crack 10%. If one of them has a big week, they'll probably pay off huge. I think both of them will be looking to have good weeks, with the major coming up. So, they're definitely interesting tournament options. I think with how highly owned those first 5 players are going to be, those first 5 or 6 players, I think they both sort of have legitimacy as in tournaments. So I'll probably try and sneak 1 or 2 of them in. I've been thinking a bit about today, and I think for GPPs, it's definitely going to pay off this week to sort of differentiate because these top players are going to be so highly owned because it's such a weak field. So using Donaldson or McDowell in a lineup probably not a bad idea. Luke Donald, I just don't know if I trust him yet. He could be another good tournament play. He actually qualified for the U.S. Open yesterday, so he's playing a little bit better, and he was playing a little bit better over in Europe. I'm not sure if I trust him enough to use him this week, but you could slide him in with Donaldson and McDowell. Good tournament options for sure. I'm not going to use Bowditch or Kelly at those prices. That's just ridiculous. George McNeil's been playing really well. I think he's a little bit overpriced this week, and I think people are going to be on him. I actually don't like him a ton this week just because he's a little bit too expensive and because of his course history. He doesn't really have that many top finishes here. I don't believe he actually has any like top 20s at this course. So I'm probably mostly going to be off George McNeil. I think he's going to be highly owned for tournaments. And I think he's a little bit too expensive for cash games. So, he's been playing really well. So I want to use him a bit, but I think the right play is to sort of go for some players beneath him because I think there's better options. And I really like Brian Harman this week is one of those options. He was 6th tier last year, and you can see his last 4 events. He did miss one cut, but 10th at Crown Plaza, 8th at the Players, and then he actually had a pretty good week at the Byron Nelson. He was 5th in greens and regulation at the Byron Nelson, and he was 2nd in greens and regulation at the Crown Plaza. So this guy's hitting the ball really well right now. And he was 6th tier last year. So the course sets up well for Brian Harman this week. And he's a streaky player, but when he's hitting it, he's really accurate, which I like a lot. And I think he's really just, if he has a good putting week this week, I kind of like him as a dark horse to win. So I really like Brian Harman this week. He's going to be one of my main plays for tournaments. And then the guy beneath him, Sean Stefani, another really solid play. He's going to be really popular. He was 7th in this event a couple years ago. Been playing solidly all year, tee to green. So ranks highly in par 4 scoring, and he's done well this course. There's really nothing not to like about Sean Stefani this week, especially in the weak field. Good cash game price, so he'll be highly owned. I'm going to use him in cash games. Definitely still going to use him in a couple tournament lineups, but not as much, just because of the ownership percentages. Jason Bone, another player I'm really liking this week. Super accurate. He's like 3rd in approach proximity and ranks highly in greens and regulation. He didn't play great last week, but quite frankly, he doesn't really have a good course history at the Memorial Tournament, so I'm not too concerned about it. He just about won the Crown Plaza, was top 10 at Wells Fargo, and he's got a good record at this event. He's got like a few top 20s in the past couple of years. So I really like Jason Bone this week. He's another guy like Brian Harman. I'm going to roll it out in a lot of tournaments. Priced really cheap, which I like. So I'll have a lot of exposure to him. I'm hoping he's not too popular, but he might be. So something to think about. Moving down, Russell Knox, probably another popular play. He doesn't have a great course history at this event, but he's been playing so well. And he played well again last week, opened with a 66, closed with a 68. This is a guy who, again, ranks really highly in approach proximity. I believe he's like 2nd on tour or 3rd on tour, and ranks highly in greens and regulation. So I like Knox this week. I wish he had a bit better course history, but he's still someone to keep an eye on. I'll probably leave him out of my cash game lineups just because I'm a little worried about the course history. But I still really like him this week. I think the stats don't lie. He's just been playing so solid this year that he makes for another good option. Tringale played poorly last week, but as a tournament option, he kind of intrigues me a little bit. If you're looking for a lower owned option off Cockrack and Knox, I'd consider Tringale. I'd probably maybe consider Matt Every a little bit more. He was 3rd at this event last year, and if you remember the event I mentioned at the start, the OHL Classic, he actually has a 3rd at that event as well. So there's a little bit of course correlation going on there with Matt Every. He obviously really likes it here. He really likes the course. And I'm definitely going to use him in tournaments this week, Matt Every. When he's on, he's really on, and he can land you like a top 5. So I like Matt Every as a tournament option and as like kind of a swerve play off of Russell Knox. John Curran's been playing well. Don't believe he's played this course before, but 33rd at the Crown Plaza, 6th at the Byron Nelson. I'll probably, he's someone to consider just in a weak field. I'm probably not going to use him, but just because I believe it's the first time. Oh, actually, I think he's played this event before, but I'm not sure. You might have to look that up. Someone else to consider, though, as kind of a tournament option. So moving down a little bit, Brendan de Jong, pretty solid player. He's been a little bit hit or miss this year, not as consistent as usual. Not a great record at this event. He's definitely someone you can use, I think, at this price and in this weak field. He's probably talent-wise better than a lot of the players, but I might use him in like a lineup or two, but I'm not going to go nuts with him this week. Doesn't have like a super great history here, but he should suit the course pretty well. He's a pretty accurate player when he's on, and he hits his approaches pretty well too. So I don't mind de Jong. Camilo Villegas has a very nice course history here, and he played pretty well last week. I believe he was like 40th. So someone else to consider this price range. But there's a couple other players I like sort of more than those two. One is Will Wilcox. He's got a top 20 at this event, and he's just a really solid tee to green player. 26th at the Byron Nelson, 33rd at the Valspar, and he was 6th at the Puerto Rico event. So some pretty good results. He's just been really consistent all year. He's got he doesn't have full membership on tour, so he's always going to take advantage of every tournament he's in, and that's kind of one thing I like about Wilcox. He's not just going to he's going to take this event seriously. So and he's got a course history here that's pretty good. So he's someone to consider at 7,600. Chesson Headley, a good tournament play for sure. He always seems to pop up at certain events, and I believe he was 13th here last year. So yeah, I mean, a really good tournament play, I think, Chesson Headley. Kevin Chappell, someone I was a little bit interested in. Not sure if I'll use him, but good, solid player. He's never played here before, which is sort of a knock against him, but he's been playing a lot better recently. So just someone else to consider. Really good tee to green game player when he's on. Played poorly at the start of the year, but he's a really good player. I'd probably, I might even lean Chappell over Headley this week, just because I really like Chappell. But both of those guys are good tournament options in my mind. They're kind of hit or miss. I wouldn't use them in too many lineups, but again, you're looking for like a really low-owned tournament play. Both of those guys sort of fit the bill. I think Chappell will probably be even lower owned than Headley, but those are the type of plays that I think you really need to look for this week. You need to look for a guy who's like 5% or under. And, a lot of the popular players we've kind of already been talking about, I think both those guys are interesting plays because they'll be low owned. So, and then one of my favorite plays this week, Blayne Barber. This guy's a rookie on tour, and not many people really know too much about him, but he's played pretty well this year. Just had a baby, and he also just qualified for the U.S. Open this week. So he's playing well. I know he missed the cut at the Wells Fargo, but top 10 at the Zurich Classic. And he's got a couple other top 10s from earlier in the season there at the Northern Trust, and I believe he had another one at the OHL Classic. So Barber is definitely like one of those tournament options I'm going to be using this week. He's a rookie, but he's actually posted some really good results. Like he's got 3 top 10s on the year. So someone who could just rise up in this weak field, and really like any one of these players could, but I like Barber's chances to do it this week. He's got a lot to play for as a rookie. So someone I'm keying on sort of for my tournaments, definitely Blayne Barber. Moving down a little bit more here. Not too interested in too many of these guys. And as we get lower in prices, you can see, like the quality of player really goes down. Like I'm not really interested in any of these plays. Ben Crane, there's the defending champion, but he's just so inconsistent. And now you can really see how sort of strange this field is. So there's a couple names here. Matt Jones, I'd normally consider in this field, but doesn't have a good course history here, so I'll probably stay away from him this week. Scott Brown's been playing well. Definitely someone you could consider. He generally plays well in these weaker events too, and he's been really solid. Like I'll bring his card up here. He missed the cut last week, but he only missed it by a shot. And before that, you can see he's been making cuts left and right. So he's just a really solid player. Good putter when he's on too. So hitting it well. I definitely consider Scott Brown at 7,000, and I definitely consider Colton Oast. Nosa's a really talented like tee to green player. You can see he obviously missed the cut last week too, but again, I'm not going to begrudge a guy one missed cut. He had 2 top 10s before that, and has been hitting it like really well. So I like this event for him. I believe he's got like a top 15. He's got like a 13th place at this event too. I believe he's played it 2 or 3 times. But when he gets hot, he tends to really stay hot for a bit. I really like him as a tournament play at this price too. I think if I was going, going to rank the players at this price, I would probably go Colt Knost for tournaments. Probably use Willie McGirt for cash games, and then maybe Scott Brown for a tournament too. McGirt's really consistent. I really like him this week. He's a really consistent option at this price, especially considering this weak field. But I really like Colt Knost for tournaments. I think he's a really interesting tournament play this week. So that's kind of my ideas at the 7,000 range. I like those 3 players right there. Moving down a little bit more here, you can see the options get lesser and lesser. Charles Howell III is going to be a really popular play this week. Again, he's a more consistent player than most of the other players. He's just a quality player, sort of in a sea of mediocrity this week. So he hadn't been playing too well, but he did make the cut last week, and you can see he finished 31st. Started off poorly, but then came back with a really, really huge second round. And he's got a good course history this event. I believe he's made like 6 of his last 6 cuts, and he's got like a 3rd place here in 2012. So Charles Howell, good course history, playing a bit better now. He's good. He's a good cash game option. I would personally probably fade him in tournaments because he's going to be so highly owned. But definitely a good cash game play I'm going to be using. He's just consistent, and he makes a lot of cuts. And you can't say that about too many players in this price range this week. So Lucas Glover. A really bad putter, but he's a really solid tee to green player, and he does have good approach proximity numbers, and he does have good greens and regulation numbers. I believe he's like top 10 in both. And he's actually been making cuts lately, so I think that I won't ever use Lucas Glover in a cash game because he's such a bad putter. But for a tournament option at that price, yeah, I would probably use Glover this week. He's definitely capable of having a sort of hot week with his clubs and landing like a top 10 in this weaker field. So someone, I thought I'd mention because he really does set up well for the course. He just can't putt. If you've ever seen him putt, it's kind of pathetic. He's got a case of the yips. I shouldn't be that bad, but it is pretty bad. It's kind of a shame because if he could putt better, he'd probably have won a couple tournaments this year. But anyways, moving on. There's actually a couple solid plays at 6,600. Retief Goosen has a really good record at this event. He was actually in contention here last year, and then he just had he shot like 80 in the last round last year. He went from like top 3 to like 30th or something. So, but he's got a good record of this event. Played well at the Memorial, played pretty solidly, and he qualified for the U.S. Open on Monday too. So his game looks like it's in pretty good shape. I know he took like a week off or something. I think he took the Byron. I think he pulled out of the Byron Nelson, but he looks healthy. He's ready for the U.S. Open. I expect he'll have a good week this week, and at 6,600, that's a pretty solid price for what he offers in this field. So I like Retief Goosen, probably even for cash games. And John Merrick is the other player I like at this price. He's got a really good record of this event, hits it pretty far, and he's a former winner on tour. He actually won the Northern Trust Open, I believe, in 2012 or 2013. So, I mean, he's a pretty quality player. He just had a bad year last year. 16th at the Byron Nelson. Made his 3 out of his last 4 cuts, so he's playing well. I actually really like him as a tournament play this week at this price. Like, I think if I'm going for this price, I'm leaning Goosen for cash games. But John Merrick, he's got a really good course history. Like, he's got a couple top 10s. I believe he actually has a second at this event, and another top 10. So I really like John Merrick for tournament purposes at this price. Really sort of a sneaky play. Quality player, definitely has the ability to land you like a top 20 or even better. So. Moving down here, Billy Hurley III, solid player when he's on. I guess I like him for cut making purposes. I don't see a ton of upside there. Scott Stallings is kind of interesting. He's always good for 1 or 2 really big finishes in the year, and he does have a really good course history at this event. I actually used him a little bit last week at the Memorial, where he also has a good course history. But again, it's a weak field, so at 6,400, I might throw Stallings into like a tournament lineup or 2 this week, just because he's got a lot of potential. he always lands one or two top fives this year, and he was second at like the Farmers earlier in the year. So he's been really cold lately, but he's someone to consider. Tournaments only. Stuart Sink is probably decent cash game play. He's made a lot of cuts recently. Actually played pretty well last week. 31st last week, 20th at Wells Fargo. So you can see, he makes a pretty good amount of cuts, especially for how lowly he's priced. Not my favorite play this week, but you could consider him for cash games. And then moving down, there's Jeff Overton is probably the main pick once you get this low that I'd even consider. I should say the only player I'd really consider. He's made his last 3 cuts now, and he's got a really good record at this event. He's like 7 for 7. He's a solid overall player when he's on. He's a good tournament grinder. Doesn't land a whole lot of top finishes, but for cut making purposes, for like a punt play or to fill out a cash game lineup, he's probably in play. Will McKenzie is a little bit interesting. He can always sort of rise up and land a top 10 too. He's super inconsistent, but Tee to green, when he's on, he's pretty good. I'd probably consider him for tournaments, but my main opinion is try not to go this low that often. Try and stay out of this price range because there's just not that much talent here. Overton's okay. David Toms you can maybe even use. He hasn't played well this year, but he's played really well this event in the past. And maybe Will McKenzie. Those are the 3 names that would sort of stick out to me once you get to 6,100. Going down even further, I wouldn't try not to venture much further down, but if you were interested in doing so, there's a couple names to talk about here. Robert Garrigus has a really good record at this event, but he's just been awful this year. I imagine he'll probably turn it around soon, but I don't know. I don't think I'd probably risk Robert Garrigus this week. He does have a good record, but I think if I was probably going to risk anyone, I'd probably either look to Robert Allenby. Allenby has a really, really, really good record this event. And I mean really good. Like, he's played here 8 times in the past 10 years, and he's only missed the cut once, and he's got like 7 top 15 finishes. So he's not been playing well this year. That's safe to say. He almost died earlier in the year in Hawaii when he got beat up or whatever. That was Robert Allenby. But he's got a really good record at this event. So if you're dipping down this low, he's someone you have to consider because, his record is it's ridiculous. It's 7 top 15s in the past 8 years. So I'd probably look to Robert Allenby. And the other player I'd consider is Rod Pampling. This guy won on the web.com tour a couple weeks ago. And then he also followed it up with a nice round at the Byron Nelson, finishing 22nd. He's a pretty solid player when he's playing well. So he looks to be playing pretty well right now. So I believe he's actually finished 22nd in this event like 4 years ago. So he's played here before. Those are the only 2 players I'd really only consider once you dip down this low, which I would not recommend doing very often. But if you were going to, I'd look at Allenby and I'd look at Pampling, and that's about it. So Andrew Spavoda was 6th here last year, but he's missed like 100 cuts in a row. He did actually make the cut last week. I guess you could consider Andrew Spavoda. Again, my main recommendation is probably don't do it this week. One of these players could pop up and have a big week. Definitely a weak enough field too, but the likelihood of it happening isn't, and it's really just kind of a guessing game once you get down there. So that's pretty much it. Again, just to recap, I think these 3 players, Palmer, Horschel, Simpson, they'll be highly owned. I think there's some interesting tournament plays once you get between sort of 9 and 8,000. But then I think there'll be some highly owned cash game plays like Stefani, like Charles Howell, that you're going to kind of maybe need to avoid for or I shouldn't say avoid, but just don't use too much for GPPs because you are going to want to look for some lower range options. So that's about it, guys, as far as the salaries go. It's a bit of a strange week for sure. I think a lot of those top players that I mentioned are going to be really highly owned. I expect, Horschel to be highly owned. I expect Palmer to be highly owned. I expect even Dustin Johnson will be highly owned, even though he's really priced high. I think a lot of people will just say, screw it, I'm going to make a Dustin Johnson lineup. He's the best player in this tournament. Why not? He makes a ton of birdies. I don't know how some of these top players are going to react this week. I see some people definitely having a lot of motivation to play well. I think Webb Simpson will have a good week. I even think Phil might have a good week. I'm not using him too much, but I might throw him in a tournament lineup because I think he'll be super low owned. And I think Horschel's been playing well too. So, there's a lot to consider at the top this week. And then there's obviously, you're going to have to sort of pick and choose your value plays from the rest of the field, which is pretty weak. So kind of an interesting week from a golf perspective, but it's obviously still the lead up to the main course, which is the U.S. Open, which I'll be looking forward to. And it's good that the salaries are up now, so you can kind of make a few GPP lineups for this week. Watch a little bit of golf and then just make U.S. Open lineups all weekend, which is what I'm planning to do. So that's about it, guys. Don't go too crazy this week is sort of my recommendation. Get a little bit of exposure to some of the top players you like and fit in those value plays where you can. And don't be afraid to go off the board a little bit with some tournament plays. I like Blayne Barber a lot, like Colt Knost a lot, and like Brian Harman too. So those are some names that I'm throwing out there. I think a couple of those guys are going to have big weeks. Harman's my dark horse to win. Also like Jason Bones. But either way, have a good week. We'll see you back here next week for the U.S. Open preview. I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you check out Roto Curve. It's a great new site. Always looking to decrease fantasy players' learning curves. Lots of baseball content on there too. And you can always follow me on Twitter as well at the Fantasy Grind. So I'm Jeff Ulrich. This has been the Waggle. Thanks again, guys. We will talk to you next week.